The chill of an Atlanta autumn usually carried the promise of new beginnings. But for Danielle Carter, it felt like an iron gate closing. Sitting in the modest, one-bedroom apartment she shared with Marcus Reed, she stared at the little pink stick resting on the bathroom counter. The two lines were faint, but to Danielle, they were as loud as a siren. She was 24, working as a junior administrator at a logistics firm, and deeply, irrevocably in love with her husband. Marcus was not just her partner. He was her anchor in a world that often demanded too much from young black professionals trying to build a foundation from scratch. She waited for Marcus to return from his late-night corporate dinner. Practicing the words in the mirror, she wanted to tell him that their family was growing, that the quiet evenings of sharing takeout over budget spreadsheets would soon be filled with the laughter of a child. When the heavy oak door finally clicked open, Marcus walked in with his tie loosened, the scent of expensive cologne and scotch trailing behind him. His eyes were not on her, but on the glowing screen of his smartphone, where the latest stock tickers and corporate realignments dictated his mood. "Marcus," she said softly, stepping into the hallway, "we need to talk." He barely looked up, shrugging off his charcoal blazer. "Make it quick, Danielle. I have an early call with the London office. Kale's restructuring the department, and I need to be on the shortlist for the director position." Danielle took a breath, placing her hand gently on her stomach. "I'm pregnant. We're going to have a baby." The silence that filled the room was not the quiet of contemplation. It was the sharp, metallic drop of a guillotine. Marcus's face went completely blank. The ambition that usually made him magnetic turned cold, hardening his features into something unrecognizable. He looked down at her not with the warmth of an expectant father, but with the calculation of a man looking at a depreciating asset. "A baby?" he whispered, the tone devoid of any joy. "Are you out of your mind, Danielle? We are living paycheck to paycheck. Do you know what this does to my timeline? Kale is looking for a partner who can travel, who can entertain without distractions. I can't be tied down to a nursery school budget right now." "Marcus, it's our child," she pleaded, her voice trembling but refusing to break completely. She remembered the lesson her mother had taught her. A woman's dignity is her own. Never let a man strip it from you. "We can make it work. I have savings. And we can adjust." "I'm not adjusting," he said, turning his back to her and walking into their small kitchen. He poured himself another glass of scotch, his movements sharp and deliberate. "I'm building something bigger than this apartment. Bigger than us. Vanessa is being brought in as the new VP's assistant. She understands the world we have to move in. You're still talking about family picnics and church socials. It's over." "Danielle, what do you mean, it's over?" "I mean, you're not going to be part of the future I'm creating," Marcus said, turning back to face her with a chilling composure. He did not yell. The cruelty lay in his absolute calm. "Pack your bags tonight. I'll leave $500 on the counter. It's all the cash I can spare without raising flags on our joint account. Find a place to stay. You'll only slow me down." The shock was so profound that Danielle could not even cry. She looked at the man she had supported through his college debt and his first corporate failures. The man who had promised to stand by her through every storm. The illusion shattered instantly. She did not beg. She did not scream or give him the satisfaction of seeing her shattered spirit. Instead, she went to the bedroom and took out a single, worn suitcase. She packed her clothes, her mother's silver necklace, and the small savings passbook she had kept hidden. When she walked past him in the living room, he was already back on his phone, typing away without looking up. She paused at the door, her chin held high, the strength of her ancestors rising within her. "You think this is about status, Marcus," she said, her voice steady and resonant in the quiet apartment. But one day, you'll look back and realize you traded your soul for a title that doesn't care about you. He did not reply. The door closed behind her, and Danielle stepped out into the cold Atlanta night with nothing but $500 and the life growing inside her. The city of Atlanta at 2 in the morning is a lonely place for a woman with no home and a secret life. Danielle spent the first week in a series of cheap motels, counting every dollar, the $500 sum shrinking faster than she had ever imagined. The reality of the streets was not a dramatic fall with music playing. It was the quiet, terrifying realization of vulnerability. The wind bit through her thin coat, and the hunger was a constant, gnawing presence in her lower stomach. She walked into a neighborhood diner, trying to find warmth and a cup of coffee, her hands shaking as she held the ceramic mug. A woman in her late 50s, wearing an apron that had seen 1,000 shifts, watched her from behind the counter. The older woman's eyes were sharp, missing nothing, taking in the pale skin and the guarded posture of a woman at the end of her rope. When Danielle tried to pay with a crumpled $10 bill, the older woman, Loretta, pushed the money back across the laminate counter. "Put that away, child," Loretta said, her voice like warm molasses and iron. "You don't look like someone who belongs in a bus station at this hour. And you certainly don't look like someone who's done fighting." Danielle blinked, the tears she had held back for a week finally threatening to spill. I need a warm place to sit for an hour." "Sit as long as you need," Loretta replied, sliding a plate of hot grits and eggs toward her. "The name is Loretta. People call me Miss Loretta. I run the little stand down by the market during the day. And I work the graveyard shift here when I need to clear my head. You look like you've been through the ringer." Over the next few weeks, the diner became Danielle's sanctuary, and Miss Loretta became the family she had lost when the motels became too expensive. Loretta offered her a small cot in the back room of her soul food stand. In return, Danielle helped with the prep work. She learned to chop onions without crying, to stir the giant pots of roux, and to season the collard greens with the exact balance of smoke and salt that defined authentic Southern cooking. The work was grueling, but it gave her a routine. More importantly, it gave her purpose. The kitchen was hot and demanding, but unlike the corporate world Marcus had chased, this world was honest. Every plate served was a direct connection to the people who ate it. When the time came, Malik was born in a public hospital, with Loretta holding Danielle's hand and whispering prayers of strength into the sterile air. The moment Danielle looked into her son's eyes, the last remnants of her grief over Marcus vanished. She saw a new generation, a child who would grow up with a different kind of legacy, one built on resilience rather than betrayal. "He's beautiful, Danielle," Loretta said, smiling as the baby gripped her weathered finger. "He's going to be a giant. You mark my words. You don't need that man's name to make this boy someone important." Danielle named him Malik, which meant king in Arabic. From that day forward, every ounce of her energy went into creating a life that would never depend on the whims of an executive. She started small, using the savings Loretta had helped her build over the months to buy a simple, second-hand food cart. She would set up near the construction sites and delivery hubs, serving hot, soulful meals to workers who appreciated the care she put into her food. Her dishes were not just meals. They were an experience of home. The slow-cooked ribs, the perfectly seasoned macaroni and cheese, the sweet tea brewed from family recipes. Everything carried a piece of her history. The word spread like wildfire through the neighborhood. Within 2 years, the cart became a truck, and the truck began catering small corporate events. Danielle did not know it yet, but she was building an empire, one plate at a time. The journey from a food truck to a brick-and-mortar restaurant in the heart of Chicago was a masterclass in discipline and strategic growth. Danielle understood that to survive in the high-stakes culinary world of a major metropolis, she needed more than good food. She needed an identity that resonated with the hardworking people of the city. By the time Malik was 10 years old, Carter's Kitchen was a household name in the Midwest. The flagship location on Chicago's South Side was a warm, brick-lined space that smelled of roasted garlic and hickory smoke. The walls were adorned with photographs of the community, local pastors, civil rights leaders, and families who had supported Danielle from her earliest days in Atlanta. Malik grew into a serious, brilliant young man. He had inherited his mother's sharp mind and his father's striking presence, but without the toxic ambition that had ruined Marcus. Malik excelled in mathematics and design, eventually earning a full scholarship to the Illinois Institute of Technology to study civil engineering. "Mom," Malik said one evening as they sat in the restaurant's office, reviewing the quarterly financial statements. The numbers were impressive, showing a steady growth that had caught the attention of several franchise investors. "I was looking at the new logistics center designs for the city's South District. The city is planning a massive urban renewal project. They're going to need catering services for over 300 workers." Danielle smiled, looking at her son with a pride that filled her entire being. "You want to handle the partnership?" Quote, "I want to make sure the people building our city get the same quality of food we've always served," Malik replied, his tone composed and mature beyond his years. "I talked to the project managers. They're looking for a local, minority-owned business to handle the catering for the next 5 years. It's a $1 million contract. Then we go for it." "Malik," Danielle said, her voice steady and full of authority, "but we don't change who we are. The food stays the same. The hospitality stays the same. That is our brand." It was during this period of expansion that the past began to fade into a distant memory. Danielle had not thought about Marcus Reed in over a decade. She knew he had left Atlanta, but she never checked the business columns or the society pages. She was too busy building her own legacy. The new location in downtown Chicago was designed to be a bridge between the traditional soul food community and the high-powered corporate crowd. The decor was elegant, rich mahogany wood, warm amber lighting, and large windows that overlooked the bustling city streets. Danielle had insisted on hiring staff from the local neighborhoods, offering them fair wages and a chance to learn the business from the ground up. When the grand opening night arrived, the restaurant was packed with city officials, community leaders, and regular patrons who had been with them since the food cart days. Danielle stood near the entrance in a sharp, tailored navy suit, her hair pulled back in an elegant twist, her gaze calm and commanding. Malik stood by her side, a tall, distinguished young man who carried himself with the quiet confidence of someone who knew exactly who he was and where he came from. "It's a beautiful place, Mom," he whispered, looking out over the crowded room. "We did it." "No, Malik," Danielle corrected him, looking into his eyes. "We didn't just build a restaurant. We built a home that the city cannot take away from us." Across the city, however, the wheel of fortune was turning in a very different direction. While Danielle and Malik were building their legacy in Chicago, Marcus Reed was learning the true cost of the status he had sacrificed everything to achieve. For the first few years after he left Danielle, his life seemed to be on an upward trajectory. He married Vanessa, the polished coworker who had promised him the world, and they moved into an exclusive gated community in the Atlanta suburbs. Marcus was named Senior Vice President of Strategic Operations at Kale Logistics. He was making 6 figures, flying first class, and attending galas where the city's elite rubbed shoulders. But behind the veneer of success, the foundation of his life was made of glass. Vanessa was not the supportive partner Marcus thought she was. She was deeply entangled in a web of corporate espionage and financial manipulation. She had used Marcus's name and signature to secure loans for risky shell companies, siphoning off millions of dollars from Kale Logistics into offshore accounts. Marcus, blinded by his desire to be seen as a top-tier executive, signed the documents without reading the fine print. The fall came on a rainy Tuesday morning. Just as Marcus was preparing to announce a major acquisition, the FBI agents walked into his corner office, their badges gleaming under the fluorescent lights. They did not care about his tailored Italian suit or his gold watch. They placed him in handcuffs and led him through the atrium in full view of his colleagues. The trial was brief and devastating. Vanessa had fled the country with the majority of the funds, leaving Marcus to take the fall for the entire operation. His high-powered legal team abandoned him the moment the retainer funds ran dry. He was convicted of corporate fraud and sentenced to 8 years in a federal penitentiary. The years in prison stripped Marcus of everything he had worshipped. There were no more executive lounges, no more expensive dinners, and no more people wanting to be seen with him. His former colleagues at Kale Logistics did not return his letters. His family, ashamed of the scandal, distanced themselves from him completely. When Marcus was finally released, he was 45 years old, with $5 in his pocket, a worn duffel bag, and a criminal record that made it impossible to find work even at a basic level. The world he had worshipped had moved on without him, leaving him on the outside looking in. He drifted for months, moving from city to city, trying to find a place where his past would not follow him. He ended up in Chicago, the city he had always avoided because of a vague memory of Danielle's birthplace. The Chicago winter was brutal, and Marcus was not prepared for the biting wind that cut through his thin, worn coat. He found himself sleeping in bus shelters and begging outside the very restaurants he used to frequent during his brief corporate visits years ago. He had lost his voice, his posture, and his dignity. He was a shadow of the man who had once told his pregnant wife that she would slow him down. One cold evening, as the rain turned into a freezing drizzle, Marcus found himself walking down a brightly lit avenue. The neon signs of the restaurants cast a warm, inviting glow on the wet pavement. He was starving, his hands numb, his feet blistered inside his worn-out leather shoes. He sat down on the cold concrete steps of an upscale establishment, pulling his collar up to keep out the wind. He looked at the people walking in and out, their laughter echoing through the damp air. He wondered what his life would have been like if he had stayed in Atlanta. If he had accepted the baby that was growing in Danielle's stomach. But the thought was too heavy, and he pushed it down into the cold dark of his mind. The flagship location of Carter's Kitchen was bustling with the dinner rush. The warmth of the kitchen and the rich aroma of southern spices spilled out onto the Chicago street. Whenever the heavy mahogany doors opened, Danielle was inside, checking on the evening's prep, when she noticed Malik walking back from the front of the restaurant with a strange, heavy look in his eyes. "Mom," Malik said, his voice quiet as he approached her in the kitchen's back office. "We have a situation outside." Danielle looked up from the ledger. "What is it, Malik? Is there a problem with the delivery truck?" "No," Malik replied, pausing as if struggling with the weight of his own words. "There's a man sitting outside on the steps. He's begging. He looks like Marcus Reed." Danielle froze. The name hung in the air like an old photograph, bringing back the memory of the cold Atlanta night and the man who had told her she was not enough. She felt a sudden rush of the emotions she had buried years ago. The pain of betrayal, the fear of the unknown, and the fierce pride of what she had built since then. "Are you sure, Malik?" she asked, her voice remaining steady despite the sudden pounding in her chest. "I'm sure," Malik said. "I've seen the old family photos." He's older, worn out, and his coat is torn. But it's him. Danielle walked slowly to the front of the restaurant. She did not approach the door immediately. She stood by the large, frosted glass window, looking out into the cold Chicago rain. There he was. The man who had abandoned her and their unborn child was sitting on the cold concrete, his head bowed, clutching his torn coat against the freezing wind. She watched him for a long moment. She saw the lines of regret etched deep into his face, the defeated slouch of his shoulders, the complete absence of the arrogant posture he had once carried like a shield. Malik stepped up beside her. "Do you want me to call security? Or give him some money and tell him to move along?" Quote, "No," Danielle said, her tone calm, composed, and absolutely clear. "We go out together." Danielle pushed through the double doors, the cold evening air biting at her skin as she stepped onto the steps of her restaurant. Malik followed, standing tall and strong beside his mother. As they approached the steps, Marcus looked up. The rain had plastered his graying hair to his forehead, and his eyes were wide, hollow, and filled with the shock of a man seeing a ghost. His lips trembled as he stared at the elegant woman standing before him, and then down at the young man who looked so much like her. "Danielle?" Marcus whispered, the sound barely audible over the traffic. Danielle did not yell. She did not shout or humiliate him in front of the patrons who were entering and leaving the restaurant. She stood tall, a composed and powerful woman who had built an empire from the ashes of her life. "Hello, Marcus," she said, her voice resonant and smooth. Marcus looked away, ashamed, his hand trembling as he held his torn sleeve. "I didn't think I would ever see you again. I know what you must think of me." "I don't think anything of you, Marcus," Danielle said, looking down at him without malice, but with a deep, quiet strength that left no room for argument. "You think this is about status. You think you lost everything because of a title. But you didn't break me. You revealed me." Malik stepped forward, looking down at the father who had rejected him before he was even born. There was no rage in the young man's eyes, only the composed dignity of a man raised by a strong, resilient mother. "You traded your soul for a future that didn't care about you," Malik said, his voice steady and powerful. "You left us with nothing. But that nothing became everything we are today." Marcus lowered his head, tears mixing with the rain on his face. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry for what I did." Danielle looked at her son, and then back at the broken man on the steps. She did not reach into her bag for money. She did not humiliate him with pity. Instead, she offered him something far harder to accept, a chance to earn his dignity. "There is a rehabilitation center on the north side," Danielle said, her voice calm and firm. "They work with men who have lost their way. They need someone to handle the maintenance and the prep work for their kitchen. If you want to work, if you want to earn your food and a place to sleep, we can get you there tonight." Marcus looked at the two of them, the woman he had cast aside and the son he had never known, both standing as giants in a world he no longer understood. He nodded slowly, the tears continuing to fall. "I'll go," he whispered. "I'll do whatever it takes." Danielle turned back toward the warm glow of the restaurant, while Malik hailed a cab to take the broken man to the center. She did not look back. She stood by the entrance, watching the families laughing inside, knowing that she had won not by revenge, but by becoming unstoppable.